So hello guys, I hope you are doing well. Today is another episode about taxi business in Nairobi, that is Uber, Bolt and others. Yesterday there was some news that were broken by Bolt Kenya saying that they have finally accepted to increase their base price by 10%, not 20, by 10%. So that report was released on yesterday was 26th of August 2024. So Bolt have finally accepted to increase the base price by 20%. And in this video, I just want to discuss with you so that we can finally interpret what it means for you as the rider, as a regular user of taxis in Nairobi, and also for the drivers. What does this 10% increase in base price mean? Will it cost the riders more money, or will it give the drivers more money into their pocket? So which is which? Shall using taxi moving forward be more costly? Will you be able to feel the impact of 10% increase in your budget if you are a regular user of taxi? So that is the interpretation I want us to make right now. Last week, Uber did the same thing. They increased their minimum price per trip by 20%. I did a video about it and I interpreted it to show you what it means for you as a rider. Will it cost you more money to use Uber? You can go and watch that video. So what Uber did, they only increased the minimum price per trip. So the minimum price normally was 200 shillings. So they increased that by 20%. So no matter the distance you travel, if you request for Uber today, the minimum amount you will pay will be 220 shillings and not 200 shillings anymore. Now, for anything that could have been charged more than 200 shillings, so a distance that you travel of, let's say, more than 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers for Uber, it would have costed you more than 200 shillings. So the 20% increase is not going to apply on a trip that does not carry the minimum price. So if your trip is like 300, 400 shillings, then the increase in Uber price by 20% will not affect you as a passenger, as a rider, when you order your next trip. Okay, so note that very well. Let us now come back to what Bolt did. Bolt announced an increase of 10% in the base price. And I have seen a lot of media reporting that the base price that was announced by Bolt of 10% is equivalent to minimum fare per trip. That is not correct. What Bolt did is not similar to what Uber did. Uber only increased 20% to the minimum price per trip. What Bolt did is actually more complicated, and that is what I want us to dig into. Bolt increased 10% to the base fare, and the base fare is what I want you to understand so that you can know how it will reflect into your pocket as a driver and how it will affect your wallet as a taxi user. When these taxi companies are computing the formula for the end price, you get my point. If you are requesting a taxi, for instance, for a distance of 10 kilometers, how do they come up with the final price that you will pay? So there is what they call the base fare. So that is a standard amount that is at the beginning of the equation. So let's say it varies between 70 to 130 shillings for Bolt, if I remember well. So between 70 and 120 shillings. 70 is the base fare for the smallest cars, I think for border borders, and then 120 is for the XL. It is for the big cars. So every other car category will fall between 70 and 120. I think 120 or 130. Then you take the base fare, you add what we call cost per kilometer. You get my point? So if you are traveling 10 kilometers, then they will take how much do they charge per kilometer, then times the number of kilometers you travel. So normally the Bolt charges between 25 to 25 shillings per kilometer to 70 shillings per kilometer. So 70 is for the XL and 25 is for the for the economy class, which is an equivalent of chap chap. So this is for the small car categories. So if you take 10 kilometers times 25, times 25 shillings per kilometer, then it means it is 250. You get my point? And then you add what we call time, price per minute. So for every minute traveled, they will, Uber and Bolt will charge you 4 shillings. So we start with the base fare, which is 70 shillings, plus 25 shillings per kilometer, which is, and you are doing 10 kilometers, so that is 250 plus 70, that will be 320 plus time used to travel at a rate of 4 shillings per minute. So let's say you will use, let's say, 20 minutes to travel the 10 kilometers. So it is 20 times 4, which is around 800 shillings. So the final price for that trip will be 320 plus 80. So it is 400. So that is the standard pricing equation. But there are other things that get into pricing under special conditions. There is what we call the surge price. So if the demand is higher, then there will be a surge component into that equation. It is at the discretion of these companies. Sometimes it could be 1 times 1.1 times 1.2. So a certain increase will be effected into the equation. There is also what we call the waiting time. Okay. There is also what we call the traffic situation. So if there is more traffic, then there could be other increase. There is also what we call the tip. So at the end of the trip, if it is a card trip, okay, then the rider could add something onto the final price that has been indicated. But the basic components is the base price, the price per kilometer, and then price per minute. So what Bolt did is to increase 10% into the base price. You get my point? Meaning that for every category, whether it is boda boda, whether it is chap chap, whether it is basic, whether it is comfort, whether it is excel, there will be an increase in 10%. So for the chap chap and the boda bodas that will have a base price of, let's say, 80 shillings, then it will be 88. For the comfort and the XL that have a base price of around 130, then it will become around 146. So meaning per trip, there will be a minimum increase of around 7 shillings to 15 shillings. You get, according to what is the base price for that category of car. So for me, I think Bolt has offered a better deal than Uber, because for every trip moving forward, there will be a small increase of between 7 to 13 shillings. But does it really impact the earnings for the drivers? In a way, the problem with this taxi industry is that no matter what these taxi companies will do in terms of increasing prices, they don't want the riders to feel the heat in their pocket. They don't want the riders to feel an increase in price abruptly. So they will try to do the marginal increase possible so that nobody will feel it, so that there will be no flight from the use of taxis to other means of transport. And on the side of the drivers, at the same time, they will be protected. You know, they are protected by that. Customers will not stop using taxis. But at the same time, the gains for the drivers are also very small. Because if per trip you are getting an extra 10 shillings, it means that you have to do like 20 trips for you to get an extra 200 for that day. And, you know, if you look at the increase in petrol prices, you know what? 7 shillings per trip is enough to cover the increase in fuel prices. That is what drivers have never understood. The actions that these companies are taking, they are not taking them to increase the profitability of the driver. You get my point? They are just doing those small increases to cover the cost of price increase in fuel cost. And you can do it logically. And I have done this mathematics before. If you are buying a liter of petrol right now at 200 shillings. That liter of petrol, if you are using a highly efficient car, it can give you up to 17 kilometers. A trip worth 17 kilometers, you can be paid up to 800 or 1000. You get my point? If you deduct all the cost, so you'll deduct the cost of 200, then you remain, let's say if the trip was around 1000, then you remain with 800. Remove the commission of 200, you will remain with 600. So the 600 actually the cost of wear and tears are very marginal, and it is very hard to estimate them at the level of each trip. So for me, I want to consider that your profit for such a trip will be over 50%, because if you give out 100 to wear and tear, then you have like 500 for you as your net gains from that trip. And then and that's how business is assessed on whether it is profitable or not. If you are able to invest 200 shillings into 1 liter of petrol, and then at the end of that trip you are able to make a net profit of 50%, then that is a profitable business. Maybe the 50% is not 50% of a million, it's just 50% of 200, meaning that you have made 100 shillings, and that's how you assess whether a business is profitable. So maybe to console the drivers a little bit, these actions taken by these companies, they are not meant to give you more money into your pocket. They are just covering the price increase in fuel. You get my point? So because if you get 10 shillings per trip, then it means if fuel was increased by 10 shillings, that single trip is helping you to recover that increase in cost. And then at the same time, your clients are being safeguarded so that they don't run away from using taxis. So, but my biggest proposal into how these issues of pricing should be addressed by these taxi companies is to increase the price per kilometer by just a shilling or two. Because in my own estimation, I have seen that drivers normally would do an average of 200 kilometers per day. If you increase the price per kilometer by 2 shillings, it means that every driver who does 200 kilometers will have an extra 400 shillings in their pocket. And given that a lot of people in Nairobi travel distances of between 5 to 15 kilometers, it simply means that people will only pay a maximum of 30 shillings on top, which for me is not a big deal for a trip of 15 kilometers and above. And that would really incentivize drivers to continue doing the work they do in a very positive attitude. So instead of just doing this optical type of actions of increasing 10% there and 20% there to the minimum price, that at the end of the day will add a maximum of 150 shillings into the driver's pocket, I think taxi companies should implement a strategy to increase the price per kilometer, and then they charge the amount as highlighted, because the problem with Uber and Bolt has been the issue of rounding off. That's why every trip at the end of it, there is always a component of 0 at the end. So you either pay to 20, you pay to 30, to 50, 1,000, 1,010, but it will never be like 1,005 or 1,003 or like all 123 shillings. You get my point? Because they always they do what we call, I don't know whether it is truncating or rounding off, whether they bring it back to the nearest 0 or they take it forward to the nearest 0, which for me, it's not a fair way to price. Let them charge the price as it is, not truncating, nor rounding off. Whatever the price is indicated there, add 1 shilling for every kilometer. If the kilometer traveled are 11 and you are charging 50 shillings per kilometer, let that be whatever amount you get from that equation plus the base fare plus the time spent driving, and then don't round it off. Those simple shillings are what will make the difference in driver's pocket. So please let us understand the drivers. Let's take actions that will create a difference somewhere. You get my point? As it is right now, the actions taken by Bolt and Uber will not create impact anywhere. They will not make drivers feel anything in their pocket. They will not make the riders feel any increase in price, in a way is good for the riders. But we are talking of another strategy that in one way it will make the drivers feel motivated, and at the same time it will not cause the passengers to feel the price increase. So I hope this will teach you something, but as it is, I don't see any big change in the industry. I don't see any change anywhere in how much you will pay for your taxi, or any change in how much drivers will make moving forward.